Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is Wednesday, February 5th, 2020, 9 o'clock Eastern, 6 o'clock Pacific. You have reached the No Name Cinema Society, the film review show that dares to dig just a little bit deeper. It is one of our big finale shows, the Oscar preview, in which we're going to look at this year's Oscars and we're going to predict who will win. We're going to tell you who should win out of the nominees and who should have been nominated. That was not for this, the 92nd Annual Academy Awards. Hi, everybody. My name is Jonathan Betzler, no relation to JoJo, and I'm very excited to be with you here all gussied up because it's Oscar time. I've got Emma Stone with me, an Oscar winner who's going to break down the Oscar races with us. And I've got also a couple of future Oscar winners to be on the panel with me. First, ladies and gentlemen, an emotionally troubled young man who is marginalized by society in the upper class and only occasionally wears clown makeup. Devon Michaels is here.
It's true. Only on Tuesdays.
Only on Tuesdays. Luckily, it's Wednesday, and we can see his beautiful, unshaven face. And also with us, ladies and gentlemen, is a race car driver with a temper who also hides Jews in his attic. George Pappas is here.
All of it, all true.
Well, welcome, guys. I'm very excited that you guys are joining me to break down. You guys are going to talk about 9 specific races, and which we're going to do shortly. And of course, as you know, those of you that watch the top 10, I guess I should specify to the audience that these gentlemen have not seen my top 10, so they do not necessarily know what I'm going to say. But I can tell you, as is the case, most years I hate most of the nominees, so it stands to be a very contentious evening. The question I always ask everybody right off is how many films that they watched. There are 344 films eligible for Academy Awards this year in 2019. Last year, George was on the top 10, and you had 49 films, George. How did you do this year?
53.
53, all right. So an increase. I had a decrease, and I'll go over that in a second. And Devon, when you did the top 10 in 2017, you had 44. How'd you do this year?
I dipped down to 42.
42. So you guys are on par. Generally, the last 2 years, I've had 112. But because the Oscars are 3 weeks earlier than they have been, I didn't aim that high. It was a little too much. I got 104 in out of the 344. That sets the stage, and I'm sure there's a lot of films that they watched that I didn't. So let's get right into it. You guys ready to kick off the Oscar preview?
Ready?
Now that you've made us look bad with the number of films, yeah.
I mean, I didn't mean to. You had the option to watch 100 movies. I certainly invited you to enough. All right. So the first category, ladies and gentlemen, it looks like it's going to be Best Cinematography. Here are the nominees. I have one of these 5 nominees in my top 5 cinematography of the year. I will admit, though, that The Lighthouse is a horror film, so I refuse to watch it. So I've only seen 4 of the 5. The first thing is who will win. It seems pretty obvious to me. You guys let me know if you agree. 1917, I think, is going to take this. Does anybody disagree with that?
No.
Nope.
All right. Well, I'll start us off because I actually think this one should win. It's obviously a technical achievement and it's gorgeous. With that said, it's 3rd on my list for cinematography of this year. There are times, particularly in the night exteriors, where I felt like the lighting felt kind of contrived. Nobody does night exteriors better than Roger Deakins, and it was visually gorgeous, but I couldn't help but thinking, where exactly is that light coming from? What is the natural diegetic source of the light? So to quote a famous Davy saying from the past, it was just too bright sometimes in an unnatural way. A small quibble for a gorgeous film. Only occasionally, however, did I have a problem with that, whereas something like Joker, for example, felt consistently contrived for me. George, what do you have as should win in this category?
That is exactly what I had as should win, 1917. I mean, what can you say about Roger Deakins that hasn't already been said? When I went to see this film, I was actually concerned that it would seem very gimmicky, and I never felt that it did. The mood that it was created by all of the elements coming together was created for me very early and lasted the entire run of the film, and I thought it was a really marvelous accomplishment.
So, Devon, is it a clean sweep?
Nope.
All right, tell me what should win.
This was a battle of the gimmicks for me, even though I agree with you that the gimmick in 1917 only barely harmed it. The other gimmick, which you might guess in this category, was the different aspect ratio, not to mention the black and white 35 millimeter film of The Lighthouse. For me, The Lighthouse, from fade in to fade out, was just a painting, a beautiful painting every shot, always telling a story, always having some interesting, iconic imagery going on. It was just beautiful. The ink of the black and white 35 millimeter film was just a beautiful tapestry.
Luckily, this will stay short because I didn't see it and I don't care to, so no response from me, and that keeps things short. George, did you see The Lighthouse?
Yes, I just thought it was a very off-putting movie. That the two people in it were very good. I wouldn't necessarily argue with what Devon was saying, but I just never wanted to give it another thought once it was over.
Now it's time for should have been nominated. That was not. Devon, what should have been nominated for Best Cinematography?
Well, I'm going to keep my streak of annoying you by picking a quote-unquote horror film, and I'm going to go with Midsommar.
Saw that coming. It was on both Alex and Jim's top 10 lists last night, as was Lighthouse, actually. Tell me about Midsommar.
It was lavish. I knew I was going to admire certain things about the film because of how much I loved Hereditary. There was something that just bowled me over about the cinematography of this film. It was huge. It was colorful. It was playful. It was full of lightness and darkness and playing with the interplay of lightness and darkness. You know, the fact that it takes place in this community where they had this festival at the midsummer, so it's daylight for 22 hours a day. And the way that they take advantage of that in terms of their shot choices, because so much of it takes place with this enormous amount of sunlight hitting these hills in different ways and hitting the characters in different ways and hitting the strange things that they're doing in different ways. And yet, of course, so much darkness is going on, and how they have to play with that when they go indoors into these strange barns and so on. The interplay between the brightness and the darkness is just so lavish and beautiful.
I don't mind that you pick it only because it allows me to tune out for a second because I don't need to respond, so I can just daze off for a few minutes while you explain it, and we can move on. George, have you seen Midsommar?
No, I was on the fence about seeing it. I may still see it, but I actually did not like Hereditary.
Out of your two horror movies there, which was the better looking? What's your number one cinematography between the two?
The Lighthouse.
Lighthouse is better, so appropriate Oscar nominee for Devon. All right. George, I know you don't love the cinematography category, but we're almost through it. What should have been nominated?
It's actually not that. I can't really argue with anything that was nominated.
That doesn't necessarily mean that you don't have another nominee. That
I didn't.
Oh, you got nothing. Okay. So now it's time for my should have been nominated because George is pleading the fifth, as it were. Or I have a movie that it's possible you didn't even heard of. It's called Fast Color. It's possible I was more impressed with this film for what it did on a limited budget, but I did feel like it was one of the best lit films I've seen this year. Color itself winds up playing a major role in the plot, and director Julia Hart and DP Michael Fimignari hint at that in the lighting and mise-en-scène in a very believable way. It looks pretty and adds layers to the film without ever feeling contrived. The images are distinct yet beautiful and fit nicely into the tone of the piece. And DP Fimignari is definitely one to watch. He also shot a film Devon and I watched a couple years ago with his much younger girlfriend, Before I Fall, which for all its faults looked really good. He also shot my number 5 film of this year, Dr. Sleep. But his work in Fast Color here is the one that stood out to me the most. And though it's a highly flawed film, the cinematography I feel like should have been recognized. The film is free on Amazon and playing on cable throughout the month if anybody's interested. It's a gorgeous looking film to me. I don't know if either of you guys seen Fast Color with Gugu Mbatha Raw.
I have not, but thank you for telling us about it. I've just written it down, and I'll try to.
It's not a good film, but it's a gorgeous film. Devon.
Hey, if it's free on Amazon, I'll check it out. Take a look.
All right. And I guess that means we're done with cinematography. George, you're relieved, I imagine.
Not really. I just knew I couldn't really contribute much to that.
Well, you look good anyway. That's the important thing. All right, moving on to categories that George can get behind here. Best Adapted Screenplay. Here are the nominees. I have one of these nominees in my top 5 adapted screenplays of the year. That'll be my should win. And in terms of predictions, I have Little Women. It's a close race, I think. The odds makers have it close. But I think with the omission of Gerwig in the director category, this will be the voters' chance to reward her, not that it will make up for said omission. That said, Jojo Rabbit isn't that far behind. It's gaining steam, but I think the condensed time frame makes it hard for it to catch up. So I have Little Women here as my prediction with the caveat. Does anybody disagree?
I actually agree with you that it will win, and I agree with you as to why it will win.
I also agree. I think for the reasons you said, it'll probably just barely hold on to it.
Okay, and I will start again because for the second category in a row, I actually think this should win, believe it or not. I have it as my 5th favorite adapted screenplay of the year. The film was on both Alex and Jim's top 10 list last night, so we talked about it quite a bit. And while I liked it, what I felt was the best thing about it was its scene work with the actors and the directors. I actually had an issue with the structure of the screenplay. The jumping around in time took me out of it. But with that said, I do like which elements of the book Goering decided to focus on most. And of course, the screenplay has a lot to do with that aforementioned scene work, laying the groundwork for those scenes that just flowed so naturally and beautifully and gracefully with love and humor and joy and pain. As I said last night, while it didn't make my top 10, it would definitely be a top 20 film for me, maybe even top 15. So, Devon, I have Little Women as should win. Do you agree?
Nope. I overall liked the movie, and I think there were some real notable strengths in the screenplay. Some creative, clever touches, absolutely, and had a good sense of how to mold the emotional landscape of the audience. But I had a lot of trouble with the way it bounced back and forth in time.
That was my primary issue with it, for sure.
It was a little bit too much to get behind. It felt kind of clunky.
It's funny because that's also my main issue, my main exact issue. I guess it's just about the weight that we put on it, because I guess also just like the scene work was some of the other elements were so beautiful to me that, I sort of put a higher weight on that, especially when looking at the other nominees. Who should win, Devon?
I think without a doubt, the should win on this is Jojo Rabbit. Without even it being close, it was far and away the most inventive, original piece this year.
As you might expect, I hated the film. It came up last night. It was on Alex's top 10 as number 3, I believe. I've not really liked anything Taika Waititi's done. I don't get it. It's a very unique, quirky tone that I just cannot get behind. The balance between humor and pathos and satire and tragedy just wasn't on board for it. I just found it off-putting and not interesting. I had no real emotional engagement with it. It's my 8th favorite of the 9 Best Picture nominees. And I know I'm in the minority. In fairness, as I said last night, I was lukewarm on Thor Ragnarok. I was lukewarm didn't really laugh at all at what We Are in the Shadows. So he and I just don't get his tone. But I said last night he was the new Wes Anderson, and kind of thing in terms of the most unique voice since Wes Anderson. But I didn't really like Wes Anderson for the first several years as well. And I still don't really like Wes Anderson that much, with the exception of Moonrise Kingdom. I just don't like it. Points for originality, but I thought it was fairly unimpactful to me. So that's why I didn't really consider it at all. I don't like the film. George, Jojo Rabbit, is that also yours?
Yes, I do think there are moments in it that are not entirely successful, but it is so imaginative and manages overall to be so successful that the bumps along the way didn't bother me very much at all in the long run. Without doing any spoilers, but there is a reveal in the movie that was so well done.
I disagree with that point specifically, as I felt contrived and cheap.
No.
I'm assuming we're talking about the same moment. I felt like the humorous moments were too broad and the serious moments too serious.
Some of the humorous moments were too broad, I will give you that. But overall, to me, this film, it was a risky journey, and I think it paid off.
In terms of when there were moments of the broad comedy and all the other shifts in tone, to me, that was just so impeccably woven in terms of this is a story purposefully told through the eyes of a little boy. It's going to come off odd at first when you're adjusting to it in the early 10-20 minutes of the film.
We're going to exhaust our Jojo Rabbit discussion with 7 more categories to go, but I do feel like I need to respond in saying I get what the intention was. I do disagree that it was successful. I think it was a very challenging thing to pull off, and I think they failed in my regard, and you have to admit it's pretty subjective. And you already said 10-20 minutes to adjust. What if one doesn't adjust? Like, what if one cannot get on board with it? And you said it moved you. It left me cold. I felt nothing. I didn't care about the characters. It was like too silly for me to even bother with. Everyone else is going to love this movie. One of the things I said to you after one of the screenings is life would be so much easier if I wasn't me and, see things the way I do. I'm not going to tell you I like the movie just so you like me better.
I wasn't asking you to.
I appreciate the effort in trying to be different. I like the idea of being unique. I didn't enjoy this particular execution of it, and I have yet to enjoy this particular director's work at all. But I'm sure it'll come up again over the course of the evening, and it's going to be a long evening because it sounds like Devon and I are going to disagree for pretty much the rest of the show. We're going to talk about Best Adapted Screenplay. Should have been nominated, and luckily it's George's turn. So George, you can go first.
Okay, sir. I guess maybe if there's anything I could squeeze in there, A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, which I did think took a very interesting article, managed to make a character we expected to be a lead character into a supporting character in the life of an adult. And somehow in doing so made more of a case for him than even the documentary about him last year. Was written by Noah Harpster and Micah Fitzgerman Blue.
It's easy to have synergy when you're looking at 5 nominees and picking the best of those 5 nominees. And already George and Devon have agreed at one point in the should wins. It's very rare to have synergy in the should have been nominated because the pool is so much larger. But George, I also have Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood as the best adapted screenplay of the year. An emotionally complex and challenging film that accomplishes many of its goals in spite of a few bumps along the way. The script is full of great storytelling ideas that I wonder if director Marielle Heller overuses now and then. The Mr. Rogers neighborhood models, for example, were a neat idea, but I think they went to that well once or twice too often. And there's a beautiful moment in the middle of the film, one of the best of the year, in which an entire diner silences for a full minute of screen time. Some say the film is about forgiveness, but I say it's particularly about communication with each other and with our own feelings. The film acknowledges that it's a message for children, but it's one that we lose sight of as adults and need to be reminded of. I'm with you, George. Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood is my should have been nominated and my best adapted screenplay of the year. Devon and I saw it together. What do you think?
I don't believe this happened already, but that's a trifecta on this category.
Oh,
yes! Finally!
That's what I
threw, Devon.
I really like this movie. And this was the spot for it for me, was the adaptation of this screenplay. It was really well done, the way it's grappling with a timeless balance that we all struggle with in terms of cynicism versus just simple goodness, and the power of simple goodness in the face of cynicism or in the face of pain. There's something so beautiful about that, the power that we all have to do that for each other. My own personality, my struggle with cynicism versus the other side, it really spoke to me. If this were not as well crafted screenplay wise, I could have rolled my eyes a dozen times, but it never quite made me roll my eyes. I was with it the whole way, and I had to kind of just sit back and take it the same way the lead character, this writer, the same way he has to kind of just sit back and take it in the power of Mr. Rogers' goodness.
All right. Well, I just want to say, first of all, it was my number 7 movie in my top 10 last night. So it was discussed last night as well. But I also want to note that this is the first time in any category of any show that all 3 of the should have been nominated were the same. It's happened for should have been a lot, but it's the first time that all 3 were the same. George, do you have anything you want to add to Devon's comments about Beautiful Day?
No, but I love you articulated how so beautifully that it really could have gone into a far less successful direction, but it's so well done.
All right, I'm going to move on, guys. You ready?
Let's do it.
All right, more screenplay talk. Another potentially argumentative category, original screenplay, guys. And here are the nominees. Once again, I have one of these 5 in my top 5 original screenplays. This, I think, is the closest category to predict. If the Academy members remember that Tarantino has won this award twice already, they might go with Parasite, which has a ton of momentum right now. But my gut is telling me that they won't remember and that Hollywood holds on to win by a hair, as in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I'd say it's 55% right now. So take this with a grain of salt if you're filling out your Oscar pools. Does anybody disagree Once Upon a Time in Hollywood wins this award?
I do. I think Parasite.
Parasite wave wins it over.
Yes.
Okay, cool. So George disagrees. Devon?
I agree with you, JB. I think that Once Upon a Time in Hollywood will just eke it out.
Honestly, if we were doing this show on Saturday, I might have a different answer. I do think this is the closest. So George, my question is to you is, what should win?
Tough, because it's a lot of good work. But I would go with Parasite personally. I thought Parasite was the most striking movie of the year and the most surprising. I was taken on quite a journey. It wasn't entirely a one-sided view of some of the most complicated realities the world is facing right now. It was the one that left me chewing over what I had seen the most after it was over.
Devon and I saw this film together, and we don't talk about the films, but he was very specific about noticing how I did not applaud afterwards, where everyone else was. I didn't mean to telegraph it like that. This is the movie where I said to him, I wish I were more like everyone else, because it would be so much easier to have this show and be liked. But I thought he wanted to throw me out of the car after he realized that I didn't like Parasite. I understand the allegory. I understand what it's trying to say, but I find its way of getting there highly contrived, much like again, this is a director that everybody loves that I do not. I hated Snowpiercer. I didn't hate this one as much, but it's my 7th favorite of the 9 nominees. I feel like it's severely flawed because I feel like the characters are archetypes and not really developed, one-dimensional characters. And I feel like, the plot is contrived in order to get to the allegory that they're trying, get to say the metaphorical things that they want to say. So I didn't care. I didn't care about them. Like, it was clever, but clever for clever's sake, for most of the part for me. If not for clever's sake, certainly for the sake of the end goals that it has. Devon, I presume you also think Parasite should win here?
No, I actually did not like Parasite quite as much as you think I did. Parasite, for me, had a few distinct flaws that bothered me. There were moments when it was kind of just in love with itself, and that always bugs me. There was this recurring joke in the first half hour where he keeps saying, oh, that's so metaphorical. That as like this weird meta telegraph foreshadowing of the fact that the whole film is going to turn into a metaphor.
I had that same uncomfortable feeling with that. Yeah. I
was like, oh, come on. That's what a 17-year-old screenwriter thinks is super clever.
It's funny how far we off in some things and how aligned we are in others. Devon, who should have won, and I'm afraid because there's a script I like even less, so I'm afraid what you think should win. Go ahead.
I want to give this movie an Oscar because of how much I thoroughly enjoyed it from the moment it started to the moment it finished. And this was the category that I found for it. I'm going with Knives Out. I'm not usually a mystery guy. I don't like trying to guess things and is this being telegraphed or do I have no freaking clue what's going on? This perfectly towed the line between giving things away, but also having things that are completely, to me, not guessable. I consider myself a fairly bright guy. And I was like, I have no idea. And also, it wasn't one twist. That would have been simplistic and not that satisfying. It was multiple twists in a way that I found really interesting and just super fun. And also speaking in a not so subtle way about some other themes of our time, and did that in a film that's otherwise this comic romp that was pure fun.
The good news is I liked Knives Out more than I liked Parasite, but I would say I looked at my notes again. I said this was fun-ish, but I mean I had similar issues than I did with Parasite in the contrivance. But I mean, like, it's swallowable a little bit because I mean, like, there's this element of the movie like basically giving you like a wink, is self-aware of its contrivances. But I mean, some of them went a little too far for me. I mean, like, I felt like the prop knife situation was clunkily introduced, and it's a little obvious that it was going to come back. But the vomit gimmick was a little heavy-handed to me. Quibbles, I grant you. So I was lukewarm on this film. Brick was my #1 film of 2005, 2006, 2006, I think it was. I've loved Bryan Johnson over the years. I loved Looper. I was entertained at points. But actually, there's a movie we reviewed on this show. I don't think either of you guys were on this particular episode. It's called Ready or Not. Almost like a supernatural version of Knives Out, similar concept, that I actually enjoyed a little more. I thought it was a lot more entertaining, a little more fun. I don't hate Knives Out, though, Devon, for what it's worth. There's one film that I thought you were going to pick that I'm relieved you didn't. George, Knives Out.
I didn't like it at all. I think it probably helped, Devon, that you're not a fan of mysteries because there was nothing mysterious or suspenseful about it. It was clever, and it kept telling you how clever it was. That just wasn't very amusing or entertaining for long. There were a couple of moments. The grandmother gave me a couple of good laughs. For the most part, I thought this was just an empty ride.
It looks like in this category, for the first should win category, we're going to have 3 different choices. So that's kind of interesting because for my favorite screenplay in this category out of these 5 is once again 1917. I was really impressed with the screenplay because in a movie like this, there'd be a temptation to marginalize character development. But this film makes efforts along those lines, and it's just enough without ever feeling like character exposition is being forced down your throat. I'm so glad it was nominated because frequently voters look for flashy dialogue when evaluating screenplays, but a screenplay needs to be a blueprint for the eventual film. And the nature of a one-take film like this requires a very detailed, laid-out blueprint in order to make it work. There's so many moving parts. Improvisation and finding things on the day are so much more difficult, so it needed a great screenplay, and it got one. It's actually my second favorite original screenplay of the year, and we'll get to my first momentarily. So yeah, I've got 1917. We talked about it a little bit already.
I'd like to agree with you. I thought 1917 was beautifully written. And you said something about how it never marginalized character. I believe that's how you put it.
Yeah.
I think it stands in stark contrast to The Irishman. There was never a person that we encountered in 1917 that I couldn't believe there was a full story behind. Whether we're ever going to know anything about them or not, it always felt like you were watching people you knew that they were all full-blooded people. It made every moment that much more impactful. And I'm happy to see you say it. I thought it was a beautifully written movie that trusted in simplicity.
Devon, anything on 1917, or are you ready to move on?
I thought it was well done. The screenplay of 1917, not as gaga over it as what you're describing.
Okay, so I think it's time for what should have been nominated that was not. So this could be very interesting. So settle in, everybody. I'm going to let Devon go first.
Well, I bet this is going to really piss you off. I'm going with Uncut Gems by Safdie Brothers.
Yeah, no, I hated it. Go ahead.
This was telling a very specific story about addiction that creeps up on you. It makes some very, very smart choices about how to keep you on edge, and all the human longing that ends up killing us in many ways, especially with something like addiction. I just thought it was really impactful.
How did you know I didn't like it? I don't think we talked about it.
We didn't talk about it. I just got a sense, body language.
I got to be more careful about my body language. I have to smile after every movie somehow or something. I didn't believe any of it. I mean, it all felt unreal and hollow. I didn't feel anything or buy anything or have any interest in the characters, and no one was likable. And so everything felt forced and shoehorned. So yeah, I didn't enjoy it at all, and there's nothing really I liked about it. But I know Nick liked it a lot, Nick Danger as well. So another disconnect after our beautiful moment and beautiful day in the neighborhood. We're off again. I really didn't enjoy it. George, Uncut Gems.
Devon, you liked it for the bling. Tell the truth.
Yes, you know my bling.
Oh, as much as the first hour of it, I almost wanted to scream. But actually, it won me over. It's not a top 5 or a top 10 or anything like that of mine. The fact that it did pull me in its final hour and a half or whatever makes me look at it a little more positively than I certainly expected to halfway through. I understand your enthusiasm for it without quite sharing it.
So, George, you wanted to give yours should have been nominated.
This is going to sound so sappy, especially in light of the very cutting edge choice that Devon just made. The Farewell. I thought this was a really lovely cultural divide with togetherness underneath its story that resonated very strongly with me. I love the sentiment of it. What can I tell you? I thought it managed to be very amusing, very entertaining, very funny. Often would watch it and wonder if the person who everyone was trying to protect from knowledge actually knew a hell of a lot more than everybody around her. All of this just kept me very charmed.
It came up last night because it was Jim's number 4 film of the year. I was okay with it, but I will say the best thing about it was the screenplay. My main issue with it was the lead performance. I thought was awful. My only knock against the screenplay is sometimes it felt a little, you used the word sappy. I felt like maybe, the writer talked about, director suggested this happened in real life. I felt like maybe that perspective was a little rose-colored at times. Like, I just felt like maybe it was a little too close to home, and I almost wonder if the proper thing would have been had a different director come in and interpret this screenplay, or to have someone else write it for her to interpret it, somehow. It felt like, a little narrow in terms of its perspective. and feeling as close to the characters as you do. Like, I felt like it lacked some dimension in that regard. Devin, have you seen The Farewell?
Unfortunately, I missed it. It was on my short list of things to sneak in the past few days, and I just ran out of time. It would have been my 43rd film, probably.
It would have been next up. George, you have a rebuttal against my comments?
No, I understand why. I'm surprised I didn't feel the way you felt.
It's time for my best original screenplay of the year, and it's a film actually that Devin and I saw together. Do you want to take a guess, Devin?
Les Miserables?
No, but it was the same night,
adapted.
and it was the same night, and it was actually Alex's #1 movie of the year and my #6 movie of the year. Honey Boy is the film that I feel like is the best original screenplay of the year. A beautiful and painful tribute to the difficulties of parenthood, even if it is from the perspective of the son. I feel like the script could have either lionized or demonized the father in the film, but instead it feels like a very mixed and hence more honest portrait of a man who wanted to be a good parent, but his own demons constantly handicapped him in that goal. And now that I think about it, George, it's a really interesting parallel to The Farewell, because it's also sort of this autobiographical thing, but I feel like Honey Boy accomplished that perspective that I was telling you about by showing multiple sides of something, whereas The Farewell felt like it was sort of narrow in that regard. That's what I appreciate about Shia LaBeouf's screenplay for Honey Boy.
I'm sorry that I have not seen this film yet.
Devin, you and I saw Honey Boy together.
I liked Honey Boy a lot. By a hair, it didn't make my choice for should have been nominated over Uncut Gems, but only by a hair. I thought Honey Boy was really well put together and very evocative. I mean, I almost feel like part of why I didn't choose it is
because you were a child actor?
Well, sort of. The emotional impact that film had on me was very profound. I almost feel like I need to recuse myself from judging it academically. It felt very personal to me. The impact it had on me felt extremely subjective, but I'm glad to hear that you also felt that it had that same kind of power.
But what I need to ask you guys is, Devin, Uncut Gems or Knives Out, what's the better screenplay? What's your #1 original screenplay of the year?
Knives Out.
George?
No Parasite. Parasite.
Both of you guys have the Oscar nominees as your favorite. Honey Boy is mine. And it's time to move on. Loving it. Here we go. It's time for the acting categories, guys. What are we starting with? It looks like Best Supporting Actor. Very exciting. Here are the nominees. And once again, I've got one of these 5 nominees in my top 5. And the acting categories to me are all slam dunks in terms of predictions. Brad Pitt, I feel like, is going to win this award in what I call the Syriana Award. I can't imagine anybody disagrees with me.
No.
Yeah, I think you're right.
We're agreed on that. Devin, I'm going to let you go first on this one. Who should win? Is it Brad Pitt?
Yes. He was consistently making interesting choices and executing them perfectly. A lot of actors forget that it's not just about being truthful, but it's also about lifting whatever the material is and doing something interesting that leaps off the screen. And that's what changes it from being something that's capable to being Oscar worthy, in my view. And Brad Pitt's performance in this movie was winning that way.
I felt the character was one-dimensional. I didn't feel like he was doing anything interesting myself. I thought he was kind of one note and one-dimensional, and sometimes playing it up for laughs in certain cases. So I'm not a fan of this particular performance from him. No surprise that we disagree. It'll be mostly a theme throughout the evening, except that one exception so far. So yeah, I really didn't enjoy him at all, and I'm amazed that all the attention that he's gonna. I'm amazed that he's gonna win. It doesn't make any sense to me. George,
personally, I would give this one to Joe Pesci. My only gripe with Brad Pitt being in this category is that he's not really a supporting player in this film.
He might have more screen time than Leo. Well, you chose Joe Pesci, so let's talk about Joe Pesci. I saw enough performances where I think he got knocked off my top 5, but I probably 7 or 8. He was on there for a while until I saw more movies. I liked his performance. It's a very small role compared to Brad Pitt. One of the things I like the most about The Irishman and his understatement there.
Understatement is the perfect word for it. There was so much coming out from him. There was so much humanity always. And as bizarre as it sounds, it was always there. There was a quiet sadness to him throughout the film that was such a contrast to the things that we most like Joe Pesci for. He really gave this film a gravity that it needed.
Joe Pesci, Devon.
I would say about Joe Pesci's performance the same thing you were saying about Brad Pitt's. You know, it was good. I didn't see anything that to me I'm going to remember years from now. There were many elements to Brad Pitt's performance that I will remember and want to revisit years from now.
I mean, I feel like it's a one-dimensional character on the page, and it was executed as such. So I didn't feel like there was much special about his performance. I'm going to give my should win of the year, and it's a movie that's already come up. I have Tom Hanks. He came up last year in our 1988 review as my choice for should have won for Best Actor for Big. Once again on this show, we're mentioning Tom Hanks, or at least I am. As Fred Rogers, Hanks managed to avoid caricature and imitation, but fully embodies the spirit of Fred Rogers. He doesn't play the legend, he plays the man who has to be at peace with being a legend. I should stop being surprised by Tom Hanks, but I didn't expect such a lovely, complex portrait. Tom Hanks obviously is on my top 5. He's not number 1 supporting actor, but out of these 5, he's my favorite.
I loved his performance. I really did. He was just wonderful.
I agree. He'd be my second choice in this. I thought his performance was terrific, and it accomplished something that very, very few actors could have pulled off in terms of the power of the goodness that needed to happen as per our discussion earlier.
All right, so now it should have been nominated. Who was not nominated that should have been? George, I believe you're first, and you are.
Yikes. Okay. Crowded field, weighing out the who's a supporting player, who's not, all that kind of stuff. I don't know if this will be an obvious choice for anybody, but I found in a well-meaning movie that wasn't entirely successful, the moments that carried the most weight for me came from Rob Morgan in Just Mercy. He's a presence who I see from time to time in different films. He has never been a star as far as I know, but he is a really solid supporting actor. In a film where 2 other people were really being showcased, he really managed to, for me, have the only true emotional impact in a film that should have had more.
I've not even heard of Rob Morgan. So it's crazy to me. That's really fascinating. I look forward to, if not seeing Just Mercy, more of that actor in the future. All right, Devon, Rob Morgan and Just Mercy. Did you see Just Mercy? I certainly didn't.
I missed it.
This is strictly about him. So you didn't necessarily miss it.
I'm not worried about running out and seeing Just Mercy, but I'm going to keep an eye out for that actor for sure. All right, Devon.
Sam Rockwell.
Jojo Rabbit.
Jojo Rabbit.
I'm interested with the film, not necessarily with Sam Rockwell. His tone was sometimes broad, but that felt like part of what the movie was doing, so I don't really blame him for that. I probably wouldn't have considered him.
He knew exactly what film he was in. It does so perfectly match the tone. Whatever the tone needs from him, he gives it what it needs. He hits some of the comedy spot on, and then he also gives the film a lot more of its heart than you would expect that character to give.
Interesting you say that. Jojo Rabbit, George.
I think he's just terrific, consistently terrific on stage, on screen, and on television, wherever I see him. So I don't think I would ever have a problem seeing him nominated.
I used to love him, but I hated him in Vice, and I hated him in his Oscar-winning performance in Three Billboards. They were really over-the-top performances. I loved him early in his career, Confessions of a Dangerous Mind, even the original Charlie's Angels, and I was such a fan. And the last few performances, last few years, I felt like he was a little over the top. He's not gotten back to that place, for me, personally, that he was for Confessions of a Dangerous Mind. Mm-hmm. All right, time for my should have been nominated, and it's back to a movie I've already mentioned, and it's interesting. So if I were a one-man Oscar committee, this guy would have 2 Oscars tonight. Shia LaBeouf is my best supporting actor of 2019, so he would have won a screenplay Oscar and a supporting actor Oscar. Normally, I might be suspicious of someone playing their own father, but Shia LaBeouf doesn't fall into any traps of impersonation or mockery. It's so incredibly moving and powerful and thoroughly executed. I think it's a great performance. I just thought it was amazing work. Personal film to Devon, but what do you think about the performance?
It was a great performance. I can totally get behind that choice. I think he should have gotten a nomination as well.
Guys, ready to move on?
If you are.
Because you didn't see Honey Boy, right? You have nothing to add.
I didn't. I promise you I will. I really wanted to, and I'm sorry I haven't.
No apologies. Everybody but me has better things to do. All right. Supporting actress. Keeping with the acting categories. In my top 5 supporting actresses, I've got one of these women. I think the winner will be Laura Dern. It feels fairly certain to me. Does anybody disagree Laura Dern is going to win for Marriage Story?
Nope.
No, I agree.
Okay. So the next question goes to George. George, should she win?
Personally, yes. There was such a recognizable, ballsy, yet do the right thing chutzpah to her all through the film. She's given the best monologue in the movie. Her shark-like qualities never turned into a caricature. You always saw a person who at heart got into this and got good at it because she wanted to do the right thing. I think she cared about the people she was working for as much as she cared in giving voice to her own ego. You could laugh at her stereotypical lawyer drive and yet see the person behind this who became that person and who really did want the right thing to happen. Without ever playing for laughs, allowing humor to pop in.
Laura Dern has come up on the show a number of different times over the years. And in the very first show we ever did, Oscar preview for 2014, and I said she should have won Best Supporting Actress there for Wild. 1 year later, we did a 1990 review, and I said she should have been nominated for Best Actress for Wild at Heart. Also, last year, ineligible for Oscars, but it was eligible for Spirit Awards, I voted for her for Best Actress for The Tale, which wound up being an HBO movie. It started as an indie film, so it was eligible for Spirit Awards, but not Oscars. And she was brilliant in all those things. She's brilliant in Big Little Lies. This is not the performance for me. I think it's a good performance. I agree with a lot of the things you were saying. I feel like she played that aspect of that character very convincingly, but I chose other actors ahead of her for having more dimension. Like she was playing, I felt like she played that shark and she played that well, but there wasn't necessarily additional things, nor was it required of them. And the monologue was good, but it also felt a little showy as a monologue. I like a lot of the acting in this film, but I like some of these other actors in the category a little bit better. Devin, do you also have Laura Dern?
No, I was on the fence. She would have been runner-up for me. I agree with almost all of what George just articulated about why. I think it's a very strong performance. I think it's one of those phenomena with Oscars that just by a hair made me choose someone else.
Yeah.
Which is that I think so often, and perhaps too often, we're not really choosing the best actor or actress, or we're choosing the best written role that this person who's already a capable actor was chosen for.
I really try hard, for me personally, to fight against that.
Right, and this is why I'm articulating it and expressing why she just got runner-up for me instead of what I think should win.
What do you think should win?
Because while I think she's excellent, for me, someone who took something in not as good a film and took a role that in so many other hands would have been just and really lifted it was Kathy Bates.
Kathy Bates and Richard Jewell.
What she pulled off in terms of lending not just the obvious emotional weight, but all of the intricacies of why the emotional weight was there. It's not just a matter of, oh, this is my son, and I hate seeing him in pain of any kind because he's my son. It was so much more deep and nuanced than that. She really had so many questions. I kept looking in her eyes and seeing her so beautifully not understand why this was happening, which can be such a boring choice in a less gifted actor. But someone like Kathy Bates was able to consistently go to that well in a way that I found just really impactful.
Yeah, I mean, I went back to my notes to see what I wrote because, I mean, I didn't really consider her. I mean, I wrote Kathy Bates is always good, and she's good here. I'm not sure she's award-worthy. She's fine, and I've seen performances in this category that are more outstanding. That's what I wrote, and that's sort of what I stick by. It didn't land with me in the same way that some of these other performances, I guess. George, Kathy Bates.
I loved Kathy Bates and Richard Jewell. JB, you seem to not be a big fan of the film. I thought it was a wonderful movie. I'm forgetting the name of the star. I thought he was terrific too.
Paul Walter Hauser did make my top 5 actors. I'm not going to talk about him later, but he made my top 5.
I loved Kathy Bates in the film. I always liked seeing her work. It wasn't the TV movie version of the mother watching her son go through this. I just thought her work was very strong in a film that featured a very strong ensemble. While she didn't have a lot of screen time, she made every frame that she was in matter.
I'm not going to tell you it's a bad performance like I did for some other ones, but I didn't enjoy it as much. My should win, I'm going to shock you guys because I've railed against the movie so much. But my favorite thing about Jojo Rabbit was the surprising performance of Scarlett Johansson. I just couldn't get behind the tone of the film. But Johansson is the only one in the cast, to me, that really seemed to find the balance between humor and pathos, between absurdity and grace, without ever going too far, which some of the other performances that did to me. And it's funny that Devon called Sam Rockwell the heart of the movie, because I specifically in my notes wrote, Scarlett Johansson is the heart of this movie and is my third overall favorite supporting actress of the year. I have Scarlett Johansson for Jojo Rabbit as my personal favorite in this category, and I think should win.
She would be my second choice. I thought this was the best work I've ever seen her do. I would say she was the heart of the film. I felt that way as well. But
so voting for the heart of the film is over. Scarlett Johansson.
However, this is not to knock anyone else.
It was just funny that he used that phrase, because I'm like, damn, that's in my script. Devon, you're smirking.
I feel like we need to get a professional psychoanalyst in here to unpack this one. Scarlett Johansson was my least favorite thing about Jojo Rabbit.
That stands to reason, because you adopted the tone, and she was doing something that I felt was what the movie should have been, and everyone else wasn't, and you liked everyone else that was on what the movie accomplished. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that could be, but I generally am not a huge fan of her work. I don't think she's bad, obviously. I just, it could be just a personal subjective thing. I'm generally not into her work.
It's just going to be a fascinating evening the rest of the way. And Devon, you're going to go first for who should have been nominated that was not.
I had a really hard time with this category. It's not that I don't think there were strong performances. I went through my list of films, and in terms of supporting actress, I feel like the nominations covered my favorites. So I just was trying to remember what really stuck out in my mind's eye. And even though this role was very small, even less screen time than, say, Judi Dench in Shakespeare in Love, I decided to go with the mother in Les Miserables. She only has a couple scenes, but in terms of the strength that she conveys, the gravitas, the almost disdain that she has,
the rage,
the quiet rage that she has for how everything has fallen apart around her, all the toxic masculinity, all the class conflict leading to all kinds of bad behavior, all that was so well conveyed in a fairly small amount of screen time.
I agree with you that she's very impactful. One of the film's more powerful moments. It's a good film. I think I had it top 5 editing in that category. It's too small for my top 5. So small that I didn't really think about her. Those moments are impactful. I'll certainly give you that. George, have you seen Les Miserables?
Unfortunately, no.
Good. That means we can move straight on to your supporting actress that should have been nominated in this category.
Okay. In a way, I agree with Devon. It's very hard to add anyone to this list. Am I cheating to say Margot Robbie in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood?
You would just swap the movies?
Margot Robbie in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was just kind of perfect. I was surprised that that wasn't the film she got her nomination for. I don't know how that happened, really. But
I did like her better in Bombshell. I considered her for that. I think she has some great moments in Bombshell. I think it's clear how I feel about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood in general. I never really had a problem with her. I think the performance was fine. Tarantino doesn't seem to write characters that interest me. So I think she delivered what she was required to, but it didn't feel particularly special. Devon, Margot Robbie?
I agree. I thought it was spot on what it needed to be to provide the emotional weight that it needed, or not weight, actually kind of lightness that it needed. In a role that, similar to what we were saying about Tom Hanks in a way, very few people could have been cast in that role and pulled it off without seeming hokey or seeming like a caricature. She gave it a tremendous amount of heart and just simple, pure beauty.
Oftentimes, she wasn't saying anything. She really had to carry her scenes just with the look on her face. She always did it. She brought Sharon Tate to life as a really delightful flower child. For most people I know, the film was almost shockingly emotionally effective, and she probably has more to do with that than anyone else.
Well, I don't agree with that last statement for me, but that probably goes without saying.
Most people I know really did respond to it the way I did.
Yeah, I don't understand them at all, but no one understands me either. So it all.
We don't understand so many things about JB. We have the psychoanalyst coming, like I said, to figure out.
Are they on their way?
I put the call in. One of the hardest things I think to do in terms of technique as an actor is portray an emotion that almost doesn't exist anymore in our time period. I think she played wide-eyed innocence of that time. You know, there's no access to that. There's no current access to that in terms of what types of emotions we have to choose from in 2019. She gave it that. She gave it this very specific 1960s kind of innocence that in a way has been lost not just by a single individual, but by humanity in the aggregate.
Oh, wow. What a statement.
Humanity in the aggregate. Okay. All right. Well, I thought she was okay. I didn't really have much, but it's time for my Best Supporting Actress of the Year. Should have been nominated, and I particularly think this is a tour de force performance in a movie that I brought up earlier in the cinematography category, in the sense that it's the same cinematographer. I'm talking about Rebecca Ferguson in Dr. Sleep, which I felt she turned in a very complete and original villain. Her mix of arrogance and desperation, as well as her maternal sense of responsibility for her gang, all that was clear, believable, and evocative. She had to play the mother, play a manipulator, play a predator, play a detective, play an addict. So much to do, so much detail this character that she makes extremely vivid and visceral and believably scary. Guys, I have Rebecca Ferguson. Does anybody see Dr. Sleep?
I did not.
I missed it.
That means we can move straight along and there's no debate. No yelling at me for performances that I like. Time to move on. Still got a long way to go. Best Actress is the next category in a leading role. This is one of the best categories for me personally that I've seen in a long, long time. I have 3 of these 5 nominees in my top 5, and the 2 that aren't in my top 5 are easily 6 and 7. I liked all these performances. And the last time I saw a category this good was when George and I did the 1942 in review. That I don't remember, George, the Best Supporting Actress category that year was full, if you recall.
Any one of them could have won. I agree.
I love all these performances, and you know, any one of them could have possibly won last year. With that said, I feel like this category is not a contest. Prediction wise, I think Day Wigger takes it in a landslide. Does anybody disagree?
Nope.
No.
Okay, so our predictions are agreeing mostly in that regard. Devon, should she win? Renee Zellweger, we saw Judy together.
I think she should. She did a remarkable job of not just embodying this icon, but finding a way to never make us lose our affection for her despite her deep flaws. Part of that was also the strength of the movie. I was surprised at how much I liked the film.
It's funny, it came up last, it wasn't on anybody's top 10, but there was a couple of other biopics that came up on the top 10. I pointed out Judy as an example of how to maybe do it right. A lot of these other biopics try to bite off more than they can chew. And by Judy sort of focusing on a certain place in time in Judy's life, there's flashbacks and stuff, but it was mainly focused on that couple months or whatever it was. I think that helped it to be more successful by being a little more focused and not being as sprawling. Performance-wise, I mean, the things that separate these performances for me are infinitesimal. I agree with a lot of what you said. There were moments, like very small moments, that felt a little over the top. Like if I was looking for an 8, she was delivering a 9. And it's not really worth dissecting that much because it only comes up to explain why I have 3 actresses ahead of her. She's 4th in the year for me, but 2nd in this category. It's a great performance to me, definitely worthy, and I won't be upset when it wins. George, do you also have Renee Zellweger should win?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Anything you'd like to add?
Well, I'm happy to see you both saying good things about the film itself, because I thought, in addition to how well written it was, and there's a story behind that, because one of the writers had written a play called End of the Rainbow,
which I also saw.
Much more fictionalized. He wanted to make the film different from the play and did so. Whatever he could ascertain about this last year in her life, he was very true to what actually happened. Her work was so gutsy because it never became maudlin. Yes, this is a life going down the tubes, but she never played it that way.
It's amazing the lack of histrionics in the is
there were none.
I was expecting that. I didn't get it. I was pleased with it, and definitely a top 5 performance for me. So my should win is Charlize Theron in Bombshell. I feel like she eerily captures Megyn Kelly in a way that I didn't think possible. It's not an SNL impression. It's scarily thorough. You might expect Megyn Kelly to swallow her doubts and fears, and that's exactly how Theron plays it, internalizing all of that, but still managing to communicate to an audience that's what's going on. She plays Kelly's intelligence, her ambition, her regret, her vulnerability, her fears, and her rage with a believably measured approach. I feel like it's highly cinematic. The best thing about this movie is the performances, and at the top of that pyramid is Charlize Theron. I actually have her as the best leading actress of the whole year. Guys, Charlize Theron in Bombshell.
She was very good. Didn't have the same emotional impact on me that Renee Zellweger had.
I liked her a lot, and I always do like her a lot. And amazingly, this is not just about the prosthetics that were used. She seemed to disappear, and we really were watching Megyn Kelly. I understand why you feel the way you feel, but I have to say Bombshell was more, I enjoyed the movie very much, but it was kind of a, it just didn't have much of an impact on me, to be honest with you.
The movie itself has some major structural issues, but I really, the performances stood out to me in a number of occasions. George, it's time for Should Have Been Nominated. Who should have been nominated that was not?
Good God. I don't know who I would add to this category. I looked over every movie I saw, and I don't know who to say. I would have nominated these 5 women.
Again, I want to be clear. It's not about instead. You don't have to take one out. In order to have, but you're saying you only saw 5 good leading performances this year, and they're all nominated.
Yeah, 5 that I would nominate. Yes.
Okay. So, Devon, I hope you have something.
Yeah, but I'm gonna need your help on her name again because it's flying out of my head.
Okay.
The girl in Knives Out, Ana
de Armas.
It could have just been something that another attractive actress would have done, something very straightforward and let all the hijinks happen around her. And she instead gave it this emotional center and also didn't lose sight of the fun. I thought she expertly navigated the tone. She gave us all the comedic beats that we wanted it to have, even though she was largely the straight man, so to speak. But that's an important role to play. She played those notes perfectly. I just thoroughly was entertained by this film. And she was a very large reason why I was.
I first saw in the film Hands of Stone, and I suggested she maybe should have been a supporting actress nominee for that. And I also, was considering her for Blade Runner. I've admired her work in the past, and it's funny. I look back at my notes here. I say the cast really all commit to their characters and fit right with the proceedings. They really seem to be having fun, which is very charming, except for Ana de Armas. She's the only exception for me in the movie, and I really thought she overplayed the meekness of the character to the point where it was unbelievable and contrived. She seemed like in a different movie. She fails to navigate the turns that the character is supposed to make. And I've liked her a lot in the past, so I was particularly sensitive to a performance that I thought was kind of weak. Script-wise, it's the least interesting character to play. There's that, but I actually feel like she missed it. It was a sore thumb in the movie to me amongst all those actors. So I have the notes. I wrote it 6 months ago or however long ago it was. So it's funny that it flies so much in the face of everything you just said. George, do you want to be a tiebreaker?
I saw the film and would never have thought to include her in this category. So I wouldn't say that she was a reason, a failed element in the film, but I thought that she did not elevate what she had to work with, and she was probably somewhat limited by what she was working with.
It's funny because I normally don't single out bad performances in my notes unless I find them particularly weak. So it's interesting that I did that and they were so far off. And I'm sure you will say the one I have is just as bad. Time for my Should Have Been Nominated. And this is a performance that is a little out of left field. And I feel like it's the kind of extraordinary performance that gets frequently ignored because comic sensibility comes with a certain kind of stigma. My second favorite performance of the year, and the one that should have been nominated, is Jillian Bell in Brittany Runs a Marathon. Her Brittany is extremely deep. Her pain, anger, self-loathing, all very real emotions in Bell's portrayal that she believably deflects with humor that just happens to be hilarious. She's such an energetic performer. The entertainment masks what I perceive to be real depth. Director Paul Downs-Clyzo allowed Bell to do her thing, sort of how Barry Levinson took the reins off Robin Williams in Good Morning Vietnam. Bell absolutely owns this movie and makes it so much better than it has any right to be. So many layers to this character, but also a lot of laughs as well. Very real, honest laughs. Nothing contrived. Very human. Jillian Bell in Brittany Runs a Marathon. Guys, have you seen Brittany Runs a Marathon?
I missed it.
I saw it. I didn't like the movie at all. Didn't like her. There are moments when the character does things that we're clearly not supposed to like. but I never cared enough about her to see this as a flaw in her so much as I saw just someone I didn't really want to have to spend any more time with. I wanted to like her. I wanted to have this moment of triumph with her. I wanted to experience her growth, but I just never cared about her.
I love the movie as well. It's probably a top 20 movie, so we're more we're way off everybody, and that continues. So that keeps things interesting. I'm gonna move on, guys. You good?
Yeah.
All right, best actor in a leading role. All right. And I have, once again, one of these 5 in my top 5 leading performances of the year. I don't think anyone will be surprised in terms of the predictions. I think it's another slam dunk. I think Joaquin Phoenix takes this one. Does anybody disagree?
No.
All right, and I will start again because this is who I have as should win. Earlier in the year, we reviewed the film Two Lovers on an indie spotlight. And in that episode, I suggested that it seems to me that Joaquin Phoenix has now become the best actor we have working today. And he makes that case again here in Joker. He's the best part of the film, in my estimation. His transformation is once again extraordinary. And it's almost laughable to me how amazing he is and how different from performance to performance, believable in each one. He hits all the notes in this film in an extremely tricky role, such a deep, thorough performance in a movie in which the supporting performances aren't as strong to me. To further illustrate my point about him being the best we have today, this is the second year in a row and the third time this decade I have named Joaquin Phoenix as the best actor of the year. Last year was for You Were Never Really Here, and in 2010 for I'm Still Here. And now he's finally going to win the Oscar, and I think deservedly so. Guys, does anybody also have Joaquin Phoenix for should win?
I do.
I do as well.
All right, a clean sweep. Devin.
I think you articulated it pretty well. It's a role that obviously is extremely trying and exhausting and ambitious to take on. And he hit it. He hit all those notes. Remarkably makes you really feel tremendous empathy for this person who becomes a monster.
That was articulated beautifully. He's just a fearless actor. And JB, you're right to say that we never seem to be seeing the same Joaquin Phoenix. He just so invests himself in the character he is playing, in the circumstances his character is faced with. If there's such a thing as going around the world physically, he does it artistically. I loved his work in this.
All right, so we all got a should win. It's first time I think we've agreed on the should win tonight. Maybe I can't recall. But anyway, now it's time for real argument and who should have been nominated. And I really, really hope George has one for me.
Oh yes, I've got to say, what a year this was. I mean, there probably were like a dozen people who thought they might have a shot at being nominated, and there was a lot of great work down the line. I thought anyway. The one that stands out for me that I was sorry to see not nominated was Edward Norton in Motherless Brooklyn. I thought he really embraced Lionel, became Lionel, got behind all the tics and the mannerisms. While we might have wanted to run away at hearing someone's outbursts like that, we always saw the person underneath here. And I always cared about him, wanted this to work out. This movie rides on his shoulders, and I felt he did a terrific job in taking us on that ride.
I agree with a lot of what you said, and Devin and I both saw it together and reviewed the film in episode 57.1.
Yeah, I did.
You saw the review. I know you did. Yeah. You gave us some notes, which I appreciate. And we both said really nice things about the performance, as I recall. Devin, I had it on my top 5 until I saw Richard Jewell. And not that Paul Walter Hauser is number 1. He's number 4, but that knocked Edward Norton out. So I guess Edward Norton winds up being 6 for me. But I like the performance. Can't really argue with much you said. I just saw 5 that I liked better, including Joaquin Phoenix. Devin, you don't also have Edward Norton, do you?
I don't. He just missed being my should have by a couple. Overall, as we covered in the show, the movie was a victim of its own intelligence. That impacted my ability to enjoy his performance.
Almost a victim of its own ambition, wouldn't you say?
To be clear, my choice is specifically for him as an actor.
Yeah, and he's saying it colored his.
And what you're saying, yeah.
Devin, who's your best? Should have been nominated.
So my should have been nominated. This might cause some more controversy again. Is Adam Sandler in Uncut Gems?
I guess I should have saw it coming, but okay.
Yeah, he consistently puts out this very fine work that really has so much heart in it and so much truth and so much of that fascinating kind of rage that he plays perhaps in a unique way that is on his own level that no one else really captures. And I think there's just a handful of people in the Academy that can't forget some of his sillier fare from earlier in his career. And so he keeps getting snubbed. And I think the work that he does in this film is heartbreaking, it's real, it's gritty, it's got depth. It might make you uncomfortable, but I think it's supposed to.
The main word that when I think about his performance is, for me, is grating. I don't think I felt uncomfortable, and I certainly didn't feel any depth or heart or any of those things that you described. That didn't resonate with me at all. And it's all subjective. Like, you felt that I didn't, is what it boils down to. I don't have a problem with Adam Sandler specifically. I don't think so. I mean, like, if he turned in a performance that I thought was detailed and nuanced, I'd let you know. George.
He wouldn't have been, I don't know if he would have made my top 10, but I can understand why he would make someone's. And it's a performance that would make me want to see more from him, to see how I feel about his work.
Well, the good news is, Devon, as much as we're not on board with your choice, you are going to hate my choice a whole lot more. This is the performance, and it's my second favorite leading actor performance of the year. I have Joaquin as one, but this is a performance that I think Rami Malek in Bohemian Rhapsody wanted to be. I've got Taron Egerton in Rocket Man as my second favorite leading performance of the year. I feel like he captures Elton John without ever feeling like a caricature to me. The voice, the body language, the energy, the attitude, the addiction, the lust, the love, the needs. It was all very vivid in spite of the appropriately stylized nature of the film itself. For Dexter Fletcher's fever dream vision to work, it needed to have a grounded performance in the center, and I feel like Egerton delivers it. And a far cry from their previous collaboration, another believable characterization in Eddie the Eagle. Like I said, it's my second favorite leading performance of the year, and I'm pretty sure Devon is not a fan.
I thought he was one of the stronger aspects of the film. It was solid. It hurt me too much that overall the stylization, the structure kept losing me in that movie. And so it took away from my ability to fully appreciate his performance. But I agree with you, it was a very strong performance. But
I like the film a lot. It's the other thing. It's probably maybe top 20, top 25, probably. George.
I did not love the movie. I would not argue at all with the strength of his work in it. He was very good. I couldn't imagine anyone else doing the role as well as he did. He'd make a top 10 for me. Okay, he'd probably make a top 10 if I had to list all 10.
Well, that went a lot better than I thought it would. All right, let's we get to move on now to Best Director. These are the 5 nominees here. In my top 5 directors, I've got one of these 5 nominees. Looking at the guilds and the previous awards when it comes to predictions, and my prediction is Sam Mendes will win this for 1917. Does anybody disagree?
No.
No, I think he will win.
All right, so we're agreed that Sam Mendes will win, and I'm going to start again because I actually feel like he should. And we've talked a few times tonight about the significant achievement of 1917, and so one has to respect the visionary behind it all, Sam Mendes, who manages to blend his theatrical training and his cinematic history to this film. But here he gets something of an infinite stage on which to block his action. There's so many moving parts, as I mentioned, so many little problems one needs to solve in order to make this work. To be a ringleader on this kind of a circus is an unbelievable challenge, and one that he met and surpassed with flying colors. Granted, he put himself in that position to be challenged to that degree by conceiving the idea to begin with. With all that said, I actually have this as my 3rd favorite direction of the year. My primary, albeit small, complaint about the film is that it occasionally, not very often, but every once in a while, I felt the blocking was a little staged in order to make the single take work in an elegant and beautiful way. There are times when they embraced the muck and the ugliness and the awkwardness, and I wish they had done that throughout. But otherwise, I thought certainly out of these 5 nominees, it's my favorite achievement. So Devon, and actually George, you're first. George, I assume you disagree.
Why would you assume that?
In general, the most of the disagreement over the course of the evening?
I expect him to win, and I'm totally okay with it.
Just be clear, are you saying he should?
Between Parasite, between Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and 1917, it's very hard to choose. But at this point, I would say he probably should. I wouldn't argue with any of them.
You got 3 choices in there. It's like bonus. But yeah, okay. So it looks like Sam Mendes is going to be your choice for should. Devon, is it a sweep?
No. I think I agree that he's extremely strong. And this is clearly you're in the hands of an expert when you're watching this film. But overall, in a category like Best Director, I want to gravitate more towards uniqueness, originality. When it is so close, when there are so many strong contenders in a category like this, I'm going with Bong Joon-ho for Parasite.
Interesting. I've been on the record with how much I dislike the film. You also were saying had some issues with the film, so I'm curious why you're going there.
My issues were more with the screenplay and the performances.
But I mean, a director is partially responsible for performances.
True. But in terms of the multiple genres that he's pulling off with this, from comedy to black comedy to horror thriller to deeper dramatic statement on mankind, that's a lot to take on. In a way, it's almost as ambitious as a war film with hundreds of background people. I do have my problems with it. I still feel like overall, this category is one that it deserves.
It sounds like you're saying, a master puppeteer, he accomplishes goals, even if I disagree with some of those goals. I guess I can see that, but by disagreeing with the goals and not enjoying the film, it's hard for me to get on board, but I understand that point of view. And George, that you singled Parasite out as one of your three that were close, so I can't imagine you disagree too much.
I can't have an argument here. I understand. It's very hard for me to choose between the three people I mentioned. Overall, I think the technical challenges which Mendes set up for himself and triumphed over are responsible for me giving him the edge.
We can move on to should have been nominated, and luckily I don't think no one's heard of the movie I'm going to do, so I'm not going to get yelled at too much. Devon, is it fair to guess you're going to go Taika Waititi?
You're correct.
Okay. Anything you want to add?
Was it that obvious?
Well, yeah. Anything you want to say that hasn't been said, or?
No, I mean, I think I covered it. I think this is a film that will ring in people's ears for years. I think this is innovative and new in a way that the early Charlie Kaufman films were. How often does it happen that something truly surprises you and is just this breath of fresh air that takes you and tickles you both intellectually and by the heartstrings?
So it turns out he does have more to say about Jojo Rabbit. It's funny that I'm really on board with Charlie Kaufman's early films that he wrote, not that he directed. That's where he lost me. But and I know we disagree about that. But Being John Malkovich adaptation are longtime favorites. So it's interesting that I was able to get on board with that tone and not this one. And it really just left me cold. Like it's, you want a film to carry you away, and it's so subjective. And I acknowledge I'm in the minority. I'm just not going to lie about it, just so people will like me more. George,
tough choice. A lot of good people out there, but Pedro Almodovar would be my choice. I thought this was a particularly mature movie, which maybe in your 20s you wouldn't have appreciated. But as you go on in life and see that how it becomes harder and harder to create when your own life interferes with your abilities, and then somehow have to learn how to draw from your life all over again. I thought this was quite a strong film about the creative process, not an easy thing to pull off. I thought this film did it better than anything I've seen in a very long time. I found it incredibly moving. I think he directed the best performance we've ever seen from Antonio Banderas. I love the film. I think we've watched him grow as a director over 30 years now, almost 40. The maturity of this just really stood out, and I would like to have seen him get a nomination.
All right, cool. Well, Devon and I watched this together, actually, at my apartment. It was actually the final film in this whole process that I watched. It was number 104. And we didn't talk about it, Devon, so I don't know, but it left me cold. I didn't feel much one way about it or the other. So maybe that means I'm spiritually in my 20s by not appreciating it.
I was so moved by it. I'm sorry to hear that.
No, well, I mean, it's very subjective. No, I wasn't moved. I was mostly bored, and I felt like sometimes this filmmaking was a little heavy-handed. I wasn't that interested or engaged at all. Devon?
Yeah, I'm somewhere in between you two. Antonio Banderas' performance was nuanced and painful and elegant. Overall, I wasn't really grabbed by it. Admittedly, I was also extremely tired that day, so I don't know if I was able to appreciate it as much as I might have. But it certainly wouldn't be in my top 10. Or
You think you're tired? Try finishing 104 movies, 80 in 30 days. All right, cool. Are you guys?
I need my beauty sleep, JB.
What's that?
I need my beauty sleep more.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if that's a compliment or a dig. I can't. I have to analyze it later. Are you guys good for me to move on to mine?
Yes, I am.
All right, my best director of the year, and this is a film that made my top 10 list last night at number 8, partially because I honestly couldn't find any real flaws with it. The film is called Arctic, from director Joe Penna. It was extremely well thought out, detailed, engaging, and exciting. Joe Penna does an exquisite job of knowing exactly what to shoot, what to show you, when and how. And he does so without ever feeling like he's trying to manipulate you with a score or any overtly sentimental shot choices. I was consistently impressed with how he communicated ideas visually without unnecessarily inserting himself into the narrative stylistically. I never felt confused or disengaged, and that to me is great storytelling. When I look at great directors, I think about storytellers, and this one stuck out to me as being extremely mature in the way it approached navigating its script in order to tell a story, and also elevating its script, because these survival movies, I said last night, think all is lost on ice. These survival movies come around all the time, but it's rare to get one that manages to hit all those beats. So, guys, has anybody even heard of Arctic?
I heard of it, but I missed it.
Same here.
Yeah, it's free on Amazon. Like I said, it made my top 10 at number 8, but I didn't expect anybody had seen it. So the good news is there's going to be no argument. So that's the fun part. All right. So
maybe it'll be my number 44 film that I watch after we're done.
There's so much, though. You're going to go with Arctic?
Probably.
Okay. All right, guys, it's time for the big one. Give me a drum roll.
I think the static was doing that.
Best Picture of the Year, 9 nominees. Out of these 9 nominees, I have one of these nominees on my top 10. It was number 3 on my top 10 last night, and I'll reveal that momentarily. Before we do, it's a trickier category to predict, but if you're reading the tea leaves, which I've been trying to do, feeling the emotion and what's been going on, for a while here, I had Once Upon a Time in Hollywood as what I thought was going to win, but right now, this day and time, looking at the PGA Awards, looks like 1917 is going to take it. Is there any disagreement?
Yes.
Okay. Are you think Once Upon a Time in Hollywood's going to do it?
No, I think Parasite is going to win Best Picture.
Parasite, that's the third one. All right, so that's George's prediction. So Oscar Pooler's there. You choose who you think was right. I went 9 for 9 2 years ago, 8 for 9 3 years ago. Last year was 5 for 9, but it was still the best out of anybody that appeared in the show. I've won the last few years for what it's worth. But Devon, which do you think will win?
1917. I agree with you on this. I think that the Academy voters are going to have their flings with a couple of these other choices, but then they're going to come home to a movie like 1917 for Best Picture.
You probably would have guessed right now that I'm going to start because I do think it should win. And strangely, I didn't predict Green Book would win last year, but it was my favorite of the nominees. And so for the second year in a row, it looks like my favorite of the nominees will win. And the one word that immediately comes to mind when describing 1917 is immersive, more so than many films that I've seen in a long time. Some have complained that aspect of it made it feel like a video game. But if a video game puts you in the trenches, pun intended, then that's a noble thing to replicate. I feel like it accomplished its goal of making you part of the mission. It was enthralling to me. One of the best experiences I've had in the movies this year. Devon, I've got 1917 as should win. What do you have as should win?
No surprise here. I bet you can guess. I'm going with Jojo Rabbit on this one.
Jojo Rabbit, okay. You've said a lot. Is there anything else to say about Jojo Rabbit?
I've already covered it, but in just a single sentence, I would say this is an important allegory for our time. It deserves the win.
I mean, I got the message. I just wasn't on board with the tone. George, I've got 1917. Devon's got Jojo Rabbit. Do you have Parasite as should win?
Yes.
Okay. Anything else you want to say about it?
No, I think we've covered it. That's what I think should win. That's what I think will win. Although I'm more certain that it should Not as certain that it will.
Oscar pool people out there, he's not as 100% sure as Devin and I are. Just something to consider when you're filling out your Oscar ballots. I missed Best Picture last year, so who knows? Just to reiterate, I did feel like the characters were archetypes, and I agree with Devin about the performances. I didn't enjoy those. Just the overall contrivance in order to get to the allegory, similar to my feelings about Snowpiercer. George, I know we've got a should have been nominated coming up. Is Parasite your number one movie of the year, or is number one coming up?
Oh, yes, it is. Yes.
Okay. And Devin, same question for you. Is Jojo Rabbit number one, or is your next movie number one?
Jojo Rabbit.
Okay, so both of you guys, your number one movies are Best Picture nominees. Not my case. 1917 was number 3 in my top 10, but it is my favorite of these nominees. All right, so I'm going to drink before we get to these because they are going to hate what I have for my number one film of the year. And the other thing I should tell you guys is my number one film of the year was Jim's worst film of the year.
Good old Jim. Here, what is this?
So I'm going to need this because I love this film, and I guess no one else did. So, George, what should have been nominated?
There are a lot of things I could have picked from, and in the same way that I, went with a different director than film, Richard Jewell, such a look at our world of all you have to do is point the finger and the person is condemned. But it put a very human spin on that mentality that for me, from first moment to last, was emotionally compelling. I mean, the work in it was just so strong because I really felt like I was watching that era, which is not very long ago, but yet so much has happened since then. It was like the beginning of what we are going through now, where, as I said, all you have to do is point the finger and a life can be destroyed. I wouldn't go so far as to call this movie a message movie, but it is a message that is compelling. It has a good reason for being. And I never once felt that it got slow or that it looked down on people who were not the regular people you see in Hollywood. It was important to see that at a time when we may be just always trying to make statements, as opposed to remembering the three-dimensional people that stories have to be about.
I was so looking forward to Richard Jewell, and I agree that it's an important message. It's a tricky message. I would argue that maybe it handled it in a kind of a naive way, and also I found it being, as I've found a lot of Clint Eastwood films, especially the last 10, 15 years, extremely heavy-handed and overly sentimental. I think that Paul Walter Hauser is the best thing about it. The movie, I found myself rolling my eyes from time to time. It felt incomplete in a lot of different ways in terms of that message. Like I said, naive potentially, and maybe over-demonizing the media. It's an important thing, but it's a tricky thing, and I would prefer something with a little more nuance in that regard. Message was clear, maybe too clear, and a little one-sided almost. Devin, how do you feel about Richard Jewell?
Once again, I think I'm somewhere in between you two on this one. Overall, I liked the movie, but it didn't rise to a certain level to be top 10 this year, mostly because of what you already articulated, JB. I think there is a certain heavy-handedness to Clint Eastwood of late, and he certainly knows how to make a movie. There's no denying that. And so overall, it's a well-made film, and he knows how to tell a story, and overall, it's a well-told story. But I just couldn't quite get behind it in a larger way.
George, you're going to hate my number one. So it's like what goes around comes around. So I'm ready for it. Devin, what should have been nominated that was not?
Well, once again, it's not going to be a surprise here. I have a pretty good idea of what yours is going to be. And I don't disagree. It would be top 10 for me. But for me, in terms of what should have gotten that 10th slot on this particular year, this nomination list, that 10th slot should have gone to Uncut Gems. I think it's a real achievement when a film is able to keep you that tense and uncomfortable in your seat for over 2 hours. And it's not by doing things that are gimmicky. It's by doing things that are just good, quick storytelling with interesting characters who are supremely flawed.
Nick said the same thing about the tension, and I didn't feel that at all. And I was mostly bored or annoyed, just sort of frustrated, and I didn't care about them. So I saw they were attempting a message about addiction, but I was indifferent towards it. And I was just counting the minutes till it was over. It was an unpleasant experience, and not in the way that I think you're saying, like, oh, it made you uncomfortable or tense. Like, it was unpleasant in, like, I wanted to walk out of the theater unpleasant. I've seen worse movies, obviously. I don't know if I've had a worse experience than Uncut Gems for me, but I know that George is somewhere in the middle.
I wouldn't have given it a 10th Oscar slot, but for a movie that I initially was almost repelled by, I eventually was pulled into it, and it made me view even what had come earlier very differently. As over the top as a lot of it seemed, there's nice touches of subtlety throughout that film. I was very compelled by it, actually, and I want to see more from these people. So interesting choice.
Now, Devin, I have no idea how you would even come close to guessing my number one film of the year. Did Alex tell you?
No, just from something that got brought up earlier, a previous nomination.
Oh, interesting. So I think you're going to be wrong. But what do you got?
Honey
What's
Boy?
your guess? Honey Boy, no. Honey Boy is Alex's number one. It was my number 6, which I think I did say. For those of you that saw the top 10 last night, you know that my number one film of the year was also Jim's worst film of the year. And it's a film that George has already said was pretty terrible. Ladies and gentlemen, my number one film of the year and should have been nominated is Ad Astra from director James Gray. A beautifully complex, compelling, existential, and highly meditative film in the best possible way. Think Hearts of Darkness in space. Gray does a great job with subdued tone without losing sight of the scope or the mise-en-scène. He also manages to focus on character. We never leave Roy or his inner thoughts. The journey into space mirrors the journey into his own soul. I normally don't like voiceover. I talk about it all the time in this show, but this film uses it in such an introspective way, never as a crutch to advance the plot. It was always about the inner workings of a man's mind. To me, this film is about appreciating our time on Earth and environmentally not relying on a deus ex machina to save our species. As the film says simply but effectively, we're all we've got. So, guys, I've got Ad Astra. Jim hated it. Devin, what do you think, Ad Astra?
I am very much behind that choice. I understood why most people didn't respond to it, but it was in my top 10 of the year, I would say. It was one of the most consistently upsetting existential journeys I've been on watching a film in a long time. Brad Pitt's performance was absolutely heroic. An amazing testament to just how strong he is in general as an actor, and all the internal life that I saw and those bigger questions that were being asked just in silence. James Gray had to rely on Brad Pitt to give us those moments, and he comes through. It's an uncomfortable film. It is saying some deep, dark things about who the heck we are and what we're doing here or what we're doing anywhere. I think that's a strong choice.
Amazing, because Jim said it was the worst of the year.
I didn't like the movie. I thought the father-son story just it was just nothing was developed well enough. It seemed to want to use the space milieu as a substitute for the father-son story that seemed to be at the root of it. I don't know what was at the root of it. I found it a very tedious journey.
Major disagreement tonight, everybody, which is kind of amazing. So the next thing we're doing is a quick lightning round. I'm going to quickly go through the other categories for the audience and their Oscar pools. If you have something you want to say afterwards, you can, but I'm just going to go through these categories very quickly. We call it the lightning round. We do this every year. Starting with makeup, I think Bombshell will win. 1917 should win. Costume design, from the Guild Awards, it looks like Jojo Rabbit will win. Little Women, I think, should, not just because of the period piece, but actually the way that she used the colors to do some character work within the costume design. I thought it was pretty beautiful. The film that should have been nominated is Mike Leigh's Peterloo. Animated feature, Toy Story 4 will win. Missing Link should win. Song, I think the Rocket Man song will win. Should win, believe it or not, Devin. I've got the Frozen 2 song. As much as I dislike the movie, I think it should win the Oscar for Best Original Song again this year. The one that should have been nominated is Speechless from Aladdin, sung by my girl Naomi Scott. Score will win and should win Joker. I feel like should win, and I think it will win the Best Original Score category. One should have been nominated, brought up by George earlier. Motherless Brooklyn, I thought, should have been nominated for Best Score in this particular year. Production design, I think Once Upon a Time Hollywood will win. I think 1917 should have been nominated. Some of the best production design I've seen in the last decade. Cats, as troubled as the movie was, as troubled as the idea of the movie was, I thought the production design was outstanding. Editing, that's where Ford versus Ferrari will win. In the best editing category, it's one of the Guild Awards. this is where I think Joker should win, and it should have been nominated. I think one of the best edited films of the year was Captain Marvel, which was my number 2 film of 2019. And finally, documentary, what will win and should win, American Factory. Having the Obamas as producers is an automatic way to get an Oscar. Out of the 5 nominees, it is the best, but it's amazing to me Apollo 11 did not get a nomination. That is the best documentary I saw this year. It's my number 10 film from last night. So, guys, that was the lightning round. We're running long on time. Here's the schedule for this, our special finale episodes for Oscar week. Of course, we're almost through it now. We just have the 1959 review left. That's tomorrow night, February 6th, 9 o'clock Eastern, 6 o'clock Pacific, in which we're going to look back at the year and the films and the Oscar races of 1959 with me, James, and Patrick. So make sure you tune in for that. As far as this year's Oscar races, I prefaced it by saying most of the nominated films I did not enjoy, and that came to pass. And I think that has a lot to do with some of the arguments that we were having. But it's all subjective, and I'm not a bad person for not liking most of these movies. I hope you guys feel that way. But thanks very much, guys, for joining me. And George, we're going to see you one last time for our Decade in Review, I believe, in March. And then he's going to be leaving the show with us. But so, guys, audience, I'll see you tomorrow night. George and Devon, say goodbye to the audience.
Hi, audience.
Enjoy.
All right, thanks for tuning in. I'll see you tomorrow night, and also enjoy the Oscars. Have a good one.